Give me a check, 1, 2, 3.
Check 1, 2, 3.
One more time.
Check 1, 2, 3.
Okay. All right, and I'll have you look at me instead of the camera.
Okay.
Okay, so Jenny, we've talked about this before, but I'm going to kind of ask questions that we already did in our primary interview. But tell me a little bit about why you decided to run for the legislature.
That's a good question. When I was in 2009, I was the House Judiciary Committee Secretary up at the legislature, and through that process, I had to be a nonpartisan, silent party to the process. You know, I couldn't speak up if I had questions. I couldn't really be part of the conversation, and I realized that there were a lot of questions that I wanted someone to ask that weren't being asked. And it occurred to me that maybe as a mom with young kids, I do have a unique perspective to bring to the process. And I love being up there. I just love the energy of the Capitol, and I loved all the debates. So I knew I would love it, and I just felt like I could bring something to the discussion that maybe wasn't being brought at that point.
When you're knocking on doors, I mean, I've seen a lot of your signs around town, so obviously you've knocked quite a few doors.
Yes.
What are you talking about? What are the main issues that you're talking about?
Well, my district is west, or the district that I hope to win is West Helena, and so there are a lot of state employees, there are a lot of teachers and educators and retired public servants. So of course there are concerns about the pay freeze. You know, state employees are facing a 5-year pay freeze, and that's really difficult for a lot of families. I know a lot of state employees who are working second and sometimes even third jobs just to make ends meet. So that comes up a lot. But the other thing that comes up, no matter who I'm talking to, no matter how they affiliate themselves by party, is a real desire that in the next legislature there's more compromise, that leaders are willing to work across the aisle to get things done. And I just hear from so many people that they feel frustrated that that hasn't been happening in recent sessions, and they really hope that it'll be different in 2013.
Let's say there's still a Republican-controlled legislature. Let's say that happens. How do you plan on doing that? How do you plan on working with the majority party?
Well, it's about developing relationships. I mean, I was in the House Judiciary Committee in 2009. It was a split committee, 9-9, and I got to know and like every single person on that committee. I believe it's similar when you get up there. I mean, I think it's about getting to know people as people. Mike Mansfield once said, you should never assume that you know what someone's motives are. You should never attribute motives to somebody else. And I think that that's a really good rule of thumb in terms of dealing with anybody, but especially in the legislature is, you know, I think we have a lot more in common than not. And when I get out and talk to voters, I feel the same way. You know, we have some basic common things. You know, we want our kids to get a good education. We want to be able to bring home a decent living wage. We want to be able to retire when we get old. We want to get to go to the doctor when we are sick. And whether we're Republican or Democrat, I think those are things that we share. So if we can keep that at the center of our conversations, remembering what we have in common and starting from that place, rather than sort of starting in opposite corners and lobbing insults at each other, I think we'll be much more effective. And I'm really committed to that. I really strongly believe that it's about, you know, talking and listening and hearing all sides of an issue before making a decision.
What really stands out? I mean, you may not know much about your opponent, but what do you think, from what you've heard, what are some differences that you know you can bring that your opponent can't?
Well, I do have a different level of experience. You know, I've been out in the workforce now for over a decade, and I've got 2 children. You know, my husband and I face the struggles that all working families face, you know, paying for childcare and paying student loans and a mortgage. And I think that that is important to understand what families are facing every day, and to bring that understanding to the process.
I saw that he sent out some negative mailers. Has your race been subject to that at all? I mean, other than that one mailer, has it gotten pretty nasty yet?
You know, that mailer was the first really negative piece that I have seen. If there's others, I haven't seen them. And it was unfortunate. I think that that happened. I really believe that, again, I just think voters are looking for issues to be discussed in a respectful and honest way. And that mailer really was based on fear-mongering and innuendo. It wasn't about facts. Healthcare in Montana and in America is a very serious issue. You know, how are people going to get insurance who can't afford it currently? This is an issue that affects everyone across our state, and we need to be able to talk about it. And if we're, you know, demonizing other people or, you know, creating fear, it's going to make it harder to have those conversations. So I do think that that's unfortunate. I would love to have a debate with Mr. Hunthausen on this issue. I think we probably would find that we have some things in common when we talk about healthcare, and maybe we would disagree, but we'd certainly accomplish a lot more if we were actually to have a real conversation as opposed to negative mail pieces.
Is there any legislation that you're particularly interested in bringing this next session?
There is. One bill in particular, when I work at the Attorney General's office, I'm a consumer protection advocate, and in the 2011 session we tried to get a bill passed which would increase penalties for elder abuse in Montana. Financial exploitation in particular. Financial exploitation is a big problem in Montana, and it is a form of elder abuse. And at this point, our office doesn't have the jurisdiction to go in and prosecute those crimes directly. I think it would be great. I think it would be really helpful for the county attorneys and for local communities to have that added help because these are very expensive cases to prosecute and to investigate. So I want to put more resources into that and make sure that we're really addressing this issue in a serious way in Montana.
You know, I think some of the biggest issues that may come up this session, at least my prediction is probably, you know, medical marijuana is going to be up again, eminent domain will probably be discussed, and tax fairness. And I think tax fairness, we've seen that in this interim. Is there something that Montana needs to do to level the playing field when it comes to taxes? I mean, what's your tax policy?
That's a great question. One issue regarding taxes I've talked a lot about is the business equipment tax for small businesses. Last session, Exxon got an enormous tax break in the form of a business equipment tax break. And meanwhile, small businesses are not getting that. There's just basic unfairness there. I think that we need to eliminate the business equipment tax for small businesses to help them stay viable. I mean, small businesses are the lifeblood of our communities. They're the ones who are taking risks to get out there and start a business, hire people locally. Very often they give to local charities, they support our local softball teams. I mean, they are essential to who our communities are. So I think that would be one way to help. And I think looking at the oil and gas tax holiday is another area where we are losing millions of dollars in revenue every year, and again, it doesn't speak to fairness to me that these large multinational out-of-state corporations get these significant subsidies, essentially, tax breaks in the forms of long holidays, and small businesses don't get that. You know, small businesses are paying taxes from the day that they open their doors. So I think we need to refocus our priorities, and I hear this from constituents, voters all the time, that we need to refocus on the people who themselves have invested in our communities and make sure that we're putting them at the forefront of our policy decisions.
Talk a little bit about your background and what you do and just a little bit about Jenny.
Okay. I work as a consumer advocate at the Attorney General's office. I've been with them for over 3 years now, and my main role there is to travel the state educating seniors and high school students about fraud and scams and how to prevent, you know, exploitation. So I do a lot of that. I develop materials and I go on, you know, give speaking engagements, do talks around the state. I also have had the opportunity to do some special projects as well. I was part of a Department of Justice delegation where we traveled to all 7 of the tribal nations and met with all 7 tribal councils on ways that we could work together to improve opportunities both on the reservations and off the reservations. I've also been a land board staffer to the Attorney General, so I look at land use issues around the state. Resource development. I've been to a huge coal mine. I've been to an oil rig. I've been to timber management sites. I've been to I've been to a mill, a sawmill. So I've been looking at you know, how are we using our lands and making sure that we're also preserving public access to our public lands and waterways. So I bring those experiences with me. But also, you know, I am a mom, and that is, I think of myself that way as much as anything else. I've got 2 kids in elementary school, and you know, I'm running for them. I'm running to make sure that I'm in my own small way doing my piece to make sure that they have a good community to inherit when they're my age and when they're having kids of their own. So I think about them all the time, and sometimes it's hard because I'm gone a lot, but I have to remember, and I think with age they'll understand too, that you know, sometimes this is what you got to do to lead, is to work really hard and to make sacrifices in the short run so that in the long run things are better. Oh.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I guess we didn't talk a lot about education. Education's another really important policy issue for me. Not only making sure that our K through 12 schools are successful and have what they need to be successful, but last session, the legislature cut funding for higher education by $19 million, and as a result, Montana families are paying a 10% tuition increase to send their kids to state colleges and universities and colleges of technology. And in my mind, speaking of taxes, I think that's a tax on the middle class, and one that the middle class just can't afford. So I would love to see, at the very least, a tuition freeze for Montana families.